Get ready to rise above the noise and unlock your true potential. Welcome to Unapologetic Uplift, the podcast that's all about keeping it real and helping you live your best life.
I'm Kim Staples, and I'm thrilled to be joined by my beautiful co-host, Ianthe Mauro, on this journey of unapologetic growth and transformation.
Together, we share unfiltered thoughts, practical strategies, and advice on manifesting without the fluff, encouraging you to prioritize self-care physically, emotionally, and energetically so you can make things happen without making yourself sick.
In a world that often tells you to dim your light, we're here to help you shine brighter than ever and be seen in your best light. Join us as we dive into the art and science of living unapologetically and reaching your full potential.
Buckle up. Get ready to learn, grow, and evolve with us on Unapologetic Uplift. New episodes released weekly.
Welcome to Unapologetic Uplift. I'm your host, Kim Staples, joined by my beautiful co-host, Ianthe Mauro.
And we're going to set an intention today on a candle, of course, as it will help our intention take flight. That today, the intention is for you to feel okay to not have to wear a mask and to be your authentic self. And I will add unapologetically.
And so it is. We are diving into the importance of staying true to yourself and being authentic.
Yes, it's something I can relate to through the years. And it's funny because I started off in my life as an actress, and all those years I was an actress, you are trained to put on a mask. You're trained to step into being someone other than who you are and to be able to tell a story from the aspect of truly being someone else. And it's a little bit of a funny thing when you're doing that and you are told and rewarded for wearing masks. So for me, and if any of you are listening that have been an actor, then you're going to know what I mean. You're rewarded for putting those masks on. And what becomes really interesting and can be difficult is when now we're in regular communication with someone and we want to create a deeper friendship, or we're at a family event and it's people that know us before we put these masks on. How do we transition from that and where those masks have been helpful because it's been part of our job? So there's that, which for me was a big one, because I remember too, like listening to myself, so what is a mask? I mean, let's break this down. A mask is we're not showing all of ourselves. We're afraid that certain parts are going to bother other people or not be liked or not be accepted. And so we just come forward in that moment with maybe one angle of us. And we call it a mask because it feels like we're hiding behind something. We're hiding all these parts of us and just showing the one part. So if you can imagine, that would be the mask, right? You can also imagine, and you've probably experienced this, how difficult it is when we live with a mask. Because now we have to be careful. What are we doing now and what are we not doing? If we're living behind a mask, we're not showing all our parts. We're not allowing ourselves to be in the moment. We're not truly listening, which again is mindfulness. We've brought up mindfulness before. This is only episode 3 and we're already talking about mindfulness. We probably will every time. We need to break down what that means, by the way, because I love to define terms and not just let them be as if everybody knows what we're talking about. Mindfulness is that we are aware in every moment of our existence, of what we're doing, of what is in front of us, of the stimulus that is there. We're not thinking ahead, of planning ahead and creating a story in our head of what we're going to say next, because we're actually listening and allowing it, what the person is communicating to us, to land. So when we do that wearing a mask, we can't really be in the moment because we have to hold on to this idea. And the mask can be lovely. It can be a tool that we utilize, like when we're growing up. I remember being in high school and thinking, you know what, today I'm going to go to school and I'm going to try on being the smart girl. I want to see what that feels like. So everything I say is going to be through a mask of, or a filter of, I need to sound and look like the smart girl. And what is that? rather than just getting to be me. And guess what? It's exhausting.
It is exhausting. And I can also relate because this is something that I did in my professional corporate career because I didn't believe that I was enough. I didn't believe that I was professional enough, that I knew enough. I had major imposter syndrome, and I would put on this mask and pretend to be something that I wasn't and try and make myself more like other people that were in the same position as me. So other leaders in the company, so that they would see similarities in me, and that made me feel like they would like and accept me. When in reality, when we're pretending to be something that we're not, it gives off a fake vibe. It's inauthentic. And I feel like personally now when I see people do that, I can see right through it. And it has this repulsive energy to it. If I'm being completely honest, it makes it really difficult for us to be magnetic and to attract people and make them want to be around us. Whereas when we show up as ourselves, there's a different energy to that and it does become magnetic. And I find that is always where we find our people.
I love that you said, I want people to like and accept me. I actually wrote that down when you said it. We put these masks on because for many reasons, but one of them is what you just said. We want to show and prove that we are similar to you so that you'll like and accept me. And then what happens is when we've done that, and it's not entirely truthful because we're looking at, first of all, there's an assumption that I know what it is that you like and what you accept. There's that assumption. Let's begin there. So now we're getting into their head. We've completely abandoned ourselves and we're going and dropping into their body and looking through their eyes to say, I wonder what they will accept. Okay, well, what I deem that they will accept, I'm going to now take that on and become that so they will accept me. Talk about imposter syndrome, and to define that term, it's a feeling that I'm not really who I say I am, or I'm not worthy of being in this position or being given this title or being paid for this thing. Or so imposter syndrome does really creep in when we're thinking about what the other person wants rather than just being who we are. And again, back to exhausting. I feel exhausted. Even explaining this makes me tired because I've come to the point where I don't have the energy anymore. To do this. I'm not going to pretend that I'm someone else. And you know what? This is back to the old, it's okay if not everybody likes me. We can say that, but the more we practice it, the truer it is. And even though I really do acknowledge that it's hard because of course we want to be liked. Of course we do. But at what cost and by whom? And why?
Yeah, exactly. And as somebody that spent the majority of my life trying to fit in and be accepted and wearing masks, hiding who I really was, I'm at a point now where I genuinely do not care if people like me or not. I have done so much work on myself and I've cultivated such a deep level of self-respect and self-trust that I am totally okay with not being liked. It doesn't bother me. It really doesn't bother me. I like to be liked. Of course, it feels good when people like me, but I really could care less if I fit in, if people like me. And maybe it's just me because I have tried so hard my whole entire life. And I finally got to a point where I'm just like, I'm not meant to fit in. That's not what I'm here for. And been forced to be okay with it. But there's really no part of me anymore that thinks about what other people are going to think before I make my decisions, before I post something on social media. And this hasn't always been the case, though. I used to put a lot of thought and consideration into what I believed other people would think or might say before I did things. And yes, that is a form of mind reading, what we call it in cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's an unhealthy thought pattern that so many of us can get stuck in. But the reality of the situation is we're not that important. Most people aren't spending their days thinking like, oh, I wonder what she's going to do or say, or, oh my God, I can't believe she said or did that. Like, we just get so caught up in ourselves. And the truth of the matter is the world doesn't revolve around us. And most people don't give a shit what we say or do.
It's so true. And it ends up being that those that do like us when we're being real and we're wearing less of a mask, because I think, well, anyway, those that do like us, I'll finish that thought and tell you about the mask thing, less of a mask, why I said less of a mask. Those people that do like us when we're wearing less of a mask are the people that are meant for us and will help us feel that even better about being ourselves. You get rewarded right away. And those that don't like it and feel uncomfortable because you've taken off a mask, they're absolutely not meant to be around you. And that's okay too. We don't have to be everybody's friend. We don't have to make everybody feel comfortable. And there's even a funny saying that came from this funny movie that I've watched. You know, those kind of movies that you just keep going back to them because there's something in there that either makes you laugh or it rings true. And this one, it's called Stuart Saves His Family. And I believe it's from the early 90s. Could even be late 80s. I think it's early 90s. But he says, it's easier to put on a pair of slippers than to carpet the whole world. And I always go back to that and laugh because it's true. What happens when we're putting on masks is we're carpeting the whole world. We're saying, well, I want to make sure I'm comfortable for everybody. Well, how can we do that? Just put on a pair of slippers. You are who you are. And
Yeah.
It's going to land. And the reason I said the mask thing, I do want to point out that there's a protection in putting on a certain mask at certain times. That is, I don't want to say that all mask wearing, and again, it's a metaphor for how we show up in the world, right? But putting on a mask can be a protection and it can be something that we need to do at certain times. An example would be we're meeting someone and we're not sure yet that we want to be in relationship with them, whether it's professional or friends or whatever it is, right? And so we're not ready to totally be ourselves because there's a feeling we're getting in our body when we first meet them that doesn't feel entirely safe. And so we choose to hold certain things back. But that's a conscious decision. And I welcome those conscious decisions to not show all of yourself, not give all of yourself. So in other words, there are filters and boundaries that we can put into place that aren't the same as putting on a mask. Putting on a mask is saying, I don't want you to really know who I am, and I'm pretending to be something I'm not. That's where the imposter syndrome comes from. That's where this can become a habit that literally gets you so far away from who you really are that you don't even remember who you really are. And that did happen to me. There was a time in my life I would say, if someone said, who are you? What do you really want? I'd say, I don't know. What do you want? And that's a sign. That's a sign that you're wearing a big fat mask.
Absolutely. When you don't know what you like or want and you can't make decisions, for sure. And listen, I think it's always a protection mechanism to wear a mask. So there's no judgment here. We put these things up to protect ourselves because we've been hurt and we don't want to be hurt. And there are times throughout our lives when wearing masks do serve us. So I just want to be clear that, if this is something that you're doing, don't make yourself wrong or bad for it. But take baby steps and slowly get to know ourselves better and embrace authenticity.
Yeah, and I think you bring up something that we can point out from the last episode too with forgiveness and tie it together here is what if we welcome thanking our masks for having shown up because we know that they were there to do something to protect us or to figure something out or to help us get closer to who we really are. Thank you so much, and I don't need you anymore.
That's beautiful. Okay, so let's talk about unmasking and how we can embrace authenticity, because it's one thing to bring the awareness, but it's a completely other thing to start stepping into your authenticity and being your true self. I think the biggest piece is self-awareness, just being aware and really taking the time to cultivate a better relationship with ourselves and taking the time to introspect and get to know ourselves better.
Yeah. And I would say, like everything, practice this first with someone you really trust. So let's say you've been sort of putting on a way of being that you've been practicing that isn't truly authentic to you. And you're doing this maybe in a friend group, and you show up to this friend group and you decide, you know what, today, because this is a friend group, so I know they're going to forgive me for this. And you can practice there and just say out loud, if this feels hard, that's okay, because it is hard, because again, we do this to protect ourselves. But to say out loud, I'm just going to be totally me today. I'm trying to notice where I might be wearing masks. I don't want to do that around you. And I trust you all enough to let me be totally imperfect and just be me. Is that okay? Or just something like that, where you say it out loud. And I think that is helpful because it starts. Then you also have accountability partners immediately. Imagine if somebody said that to you. Bless you. Imagine if somebody said that to you. I would feel so honored if you came to me, Kim, and you said, I've been wearing a mask around you, Ianthe, and I don't want to do it anymore. I'm going to really try to just be me. And if it's messy, it's messy. That's so endearing and beautiful. I would take that as a very important call to action, hopefully rise to the occasion for you in supporting that.
Yeah, that does make it feel safe. And hopefully everybody has a safe person to be able to do that with. You know, sometimes it doesn't feel like we do have a safe person. And, you know, I think building the safety in ourselves is also incredibly important, building the safety in our bodies and just tiptoeing out if we need to, right? And oftentimes, you know, there are so many pieces to ourselves and so many different facets that we can even confuse ourselves when we're just learning to embrace authenticity. It's like, well, I am this person, but I'm also this person. I like to be wild and funny and crazy, but I also like to be quiet and meditate and sit in silence, right? So who am I really? Well, you can be all of those things. And sometimes that can be confusing to other people too. They might think, well, I saw her like this one time and she's like this, right? So it's just being kind with ourselves and really starting slow, I think.
Yeah. And really practicing is the way to do anything to get better at it. As we practice it. It starts with us being aware of it first. So I want to start becoming aware of when I'm putting on a mask and why. Okay, I'm noticing it here. I'm noticing it when I talk to children. Maybe that's it. You know, sometimes like I used to be a teacher, and when I was a teacher, I had this way of showing up for the class. And it was definitely a mask. And at that time, I was in my late 20s. And I remember thinking, they won't take me seriously unless I put on this teacher mask, you know, and I'm still friends with some of those students that I had because we were only 10 years apart in some cases. So we're very close in age. And one of my dear friends now was my student then. And it was when I took off the mask and I was just being real that I got huge breakthroughs and trust from these kids. And I realized I didn't have to pretend to be teacher Ianthe and that there was this persona, but that was coming from a place of me not feeling worthy, which you brought up earlier, not feeling worthy of being able to hold this position as a teacher because I still felt like I was learning. So how dare I come up in front of all these high school students and pretend like I'm teaching them something? I'm also learning. That was one of the first masks that I remember very clearly noticing and then taking off. And the benefits of taking off that mask were, like I said, I had kids with huge breakthroughs who felt close to me because they realized, wow, you're like us. You struggle too. You're not sure about everything in your place in the world. Wow. It feels so good to have our teacher be authentic. That gives them permission.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. There's something about being vulnerable that allows people to see themselves in us. And again, not everybody is going to appreciate our authenticity. It is going to trigger some people. People specifically that are not being true to themselves can be really offended when they see us start to be true to ourselves. And it kind of just boils back to maybe they're not our people.
Yeah. And self-editing, I just want to give everyone a warning. If you're a person that's constantly self-editing, meaning you're about to say something, you have something on your heart and you stop it with your mouth because your brain says, I don't know how that's going to land on everyone. And I don't know that that's going to feel right to them. And now again, you're stepping into your mind reading. I want to warn you that can cause issues in your body. I'm telling you, I had thyroid disease, and a lot of it, I believe, and this can be proven, disproven, not sure. But I'm going to tell you that I don't feel it's a coincidence. At a time when I was shutting down my voice, really wearing masks and not allowing myself to be authentic, I developed a physical lump in my throat. It was Graves' disease, which is an autoimmune disease of the thyroid, affected all my hormones, made my heart race. So basically my body was saying, I'm terrified. My body was terrified because I had abandoned who I was. And it manifested as a physical lump in my throat and my heart racing. And so that was a gift. because I realized I can't live like this. My body's not going to let me. I have to be me. And I lost some friends in that time who didn't understand. Why would I leave a marriage, for instance, that I had to the father of my children? Why would I do that? It looked on paper like everything was fine. How dare I do that? There wasn't any dramatic reason. Why would I do that? I wasn't an abused wife. I wasn't, well, I tell you, I was hiding who I was, not safe to be who I was, having a very hard time being authentic. And my body said no more. And luckily I had an opportunity to leave. I had an opportunity to say, I can't be in this marriage anymore. And it was very hard. I'm sharing something very hard that I don't want to just gloss over, and we will go into it more on different episodes, but to let you know that sometimes we wear a mask even with our most intimate partners, and we are wearing masks for ourselves. Like I didn't even realize I was, to the extent that I was.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much I was masking either throughout most of my life. Because again, it kind of boils back down to mindfulness and self-awareness. I was disconnected from myself and my body. And one recommendation that I will give is for people to connect to themselves and their body and really feel into the way it makes them feel when they're behaving certain ways, when they're around certain people. There are so many answers in there that we tend to not give any attention to when we're disconnected and just kind of going through the motions in survival mode, really is what it was for me.
Yes, and I'm sorry about that for anyone listening that feels that too. And if you're in that spot, my advice is to just walk outside, take off your shoes, stand on the earth. Just stand on the earth. Even for a few seconds, I'm not kidding. It does something to you physically, connecting you back to your nature, your true nature and nature. And it's extremely healing and so simple and doesn't require any methodology or any thought patterns or any money, or any special equipment. That is the first place to start. And if you have any relationship to trees, I would also suggest finding a tree that you like. And I say relationship to trees because trees do emanate energy that feels like can be a relationship. And I want you to just go to that tree. And if you need to sit under the tree, maybe you're going to lean on the tree. Maybe you just look at the tree. It helps reground. It just helps us get back into our body and stop all of those thoughts that are putting those masks on and not allowing us to be ourselves. That connection to nature. It can also be water. And even if it's just take a shower, my mom used to tell me that. She would call it the aura reset. So the auric field is the thing we don't see with our eyes. It's now been measured though by cameras scientifically, but we all emanate with a kind of heat signature colors that are around us, that are swirling around us at all times. It doesn't end where our skin ends. We don't end there. There's this beautiful eminence that's happening outside of that. And my mom would say, get in the shower or somehow have water, jump in a lake or swim in a pool. But the water would reset the aura, she would say, just like turning off your computer and turning it back on. And then, now magically everything works again.
Yeah, I love that. The only other thing I would add is connecting to your breath, breathing. The power in our breath is also substantial when it comes to being able to tap in and connect.
And I love that that's something that you do, Kim, is you teach breath work and tapping. And it's all about about getting out of our heads, back into our bodies so that we give ourselves permission to be authentic.
Yeah. Connecting to ourselves, building safety in our body, all of these things help us really just come back home to ourselves so that we can embrace all of our authenticity and learn to be true to ourselves.
And there's another one you can do that I learned in theater school, which is you literally just go do something silly where you're not trying really hard to make your face a certain way. Even that can help to get the mask off.
Yeah, and to just shift that energy, right? Like that's something I do. That's something I actually do with clients. I'm like, let's get the energy out, right?
Exactly.
Shift it because it can build up, and it's just like we need a release. And sometimes that in itself just makes us feel so much better, more confident, and safe to take up space as ourselves. So how about we talk about the many versions of ourselves? We all have many different aspects and many selves within ourselves, from our inner child, our inner teen, our shadow self, and on and on and on.
Yeah. And so who comes out to play and what's happening here? Where are all these selves and where is it useful and how does that help us? We can say they're all different selves or they're different aspects of the one self. So we have many parts and they're all valid. They're all part of what makes us the whole. So part of being authentic is that we're recognizing that we have all these sides and we get to change our mind and we get to disappoint others and we get to surprise others and we get to delight others by whoever, we are showing up as in that moment. And it's about how do we reconcile having all these different parts without feeling like we have to put on masks? I guess that would be the question. So how do you do that, Kim? So you have all these different parts. How do you know you're not wearing a mask and just choosing one?
Yeah, so I think first acknowledging, accepting, and loving all parts of ourselves is a massive piece to being able to integrate these, right? Like, and we mentioned before, it can feel kind of confusing because we have the way that we see ourselves or we want to see ourselves. So we'll often try to stay true to that and be like, I am this person. I am the healer and the life coach, and I make good choices. And if I have these weird, dark shadow thoughts that come in, it can feel wrong and almost like, oh my God, I can't think that. And we repress and bury those shadow aspects of self when really what we need to do is acknowledge and love that part of ourself as well.
Yeah, it reminds me of this thing, which I love when I figured it out, is I can change my mind. And that's so simple sounding, but the truth is you get to change your mind because when you allow yourself permission to be able to change your mind, it means that you're being real. It means you're allowing yourself to have all the parts show up whenever they show up and check in with yourself and recognize how things are landing on you and how you're responding rather than this preconceived idea of how you need to be, which would be a mask. And the other thing is that you can change your mind, but that one is so important. And why is it weird that that's so important to me? It's weird because there were so many years, there were decades of my life when I wouldn't allow myself to change my mind because I thought somehow that was a sign of weakness or that I didn't have authority over what I was saying or doing because, how dare I? I don't want to confuse authenticity with being a slob or being lazy. And why I bring that up is that it can be totally authentic for you to be careful with your words and stand with a very straight spine. And others might look at that and say, wow, she's really putting on airs. She's being fake. But for you, that's the most real. That's the most real thing for you. That's where you're really comfortable. And so I just have to say, it's not for anyone else to judge. And as soon as we worry about that, that's when we're back to the masks. That's when we're back to not trusting ourselves and who we are. And some of my favorite words are, perfectly imperfect and messy and doing it anyway, being afraid and doing it anyway. And those practices are ways to not wear masks and to be able to just be real and be in the moment. I promise you, it's so much easier once you start doing it and trying it, and it won't be comfortable necessarily at first, but this is why we're here together. This is why I'm with Kim. With Kim, I know that I can be real and I can also not be real for a minute and then out myself and say, you know what, that was not me. And all of it is allowed.
Sure. And, I think sometimes when we make ourselves wrong because we have like this shadow self and it feels wrong to us when we aren't aware or we've never been taught about it, it can really make being authentic so hard and conflicting and almost like we're fighting ourselves. It can deteriorate our mental health. And there's actually a lot of symptoms associated with an unintegrated shadow self, right? Like,
Can you explain what shadow self is in case people are listening and say, I have no idea what you're talking about?
yeah, sure. The shadow self is the part of our personality that contain parts that like we've repressed. So thoughts that are unacceptable or emotions that we deem unacceptable, desires that we deem unacceptable, traumas that we have repressed. We have like shadow projections, things that we think, opinions that we make ourselves wrong or tell ourselves are bad. Essentially just the repressed parts of ourselves that we deem to be unacceptable.
Thank you for explaining that, because I think that is a term that's used a lot these days and not necessarily defined, and not defined always in the same way. So I really appreciate that. The repressed parts of ourselves, the parts that we're so afraid that if we say it out loud, that people will really look at us differently and not in a good way.
Yeah. And often they are repressed because we want to fit into societal norms, right? Like there's this part of us that wants something completely different than what is deemed to be normal and acceptable in society. Let me try and think of an example.
Well, the one I thought of was, I will just share this really quick. I remember thinking, I want to throw this baby out the window. Now that is a horrible thing to say out loud. Don't ever say that out loud. Don't ever do that. Of course I would never do that. I was the most devoted mommy in the world who would never hurt my child. And I don't even believe I never spanked my kids. I wasn't a child that was ever hit. So there's no violence in my parenting at all. There's literally zero tolerance for violence in my parenting. But I still would have a thought when I was inundated, overwhelmed, hadn't slept, that I could just imagine, oh, I just want to throw this baby out. I can't handle this. Now that would be an example of the shadow side. I wouldn't want to say it out loud. I just did. But I already told you the truth of the reality. I would never do that. So it's those things that we would never do, but wow, we wouldn't even want to say them because the judgment would be so intensely strong.
Yeah, that's a great example. Thank you for that. Because these repressed parts of ourselves, these thoughts, these feelings, these emotions, we often associate them with guilt, fear, shame. And it's like, can't simply tell anybody that because they're going to think I'm a terrible person, or I can't even think this because it makes me a horrible person. The truth of the matter is we all have this part of ourselves and it makes us human.
And I'll out myself too. I noticed from my example was innocent things that need you can be very triggering when you're someone that's over giving. And that was when I gave you the memory of, I haven't had a baby in 20 years. I have a 22-year-old and a 25-year-old currently. If you're listening to this in the future, they're older than that. So I remember that at that time, and that's not who I am now, but at that time, I was over giving. And again, I explained that I was wearing a mask in my former marriage. I was over giving and I was not taking care of myself. That's what led me to that thought, that dark thought, that shadow thought, that feeling, because I wasn't putting my oxygen on first. If you've heard that term, put your oxygen on first. I wasn't doing that.
Yeah.
So my heart goes out to anyone listening right now. If you're over giving, you probably have a lot of shadow stuff coming up. You probably have a lot of things that you wouldn't want to say out loud that you're feeling because you're not speaking up for yourself. And I don't want it to create thyroid disease and a lump in your throat. So that's why I share these stories. Do they embarrass me? Well, not embarrass me. I don't like it. I don't like that I was at that point, but I didn't know any better. So I forgive myself. I forgive my former self. I love her. She did the best she could. And I do better now. And I'll do better hopefully tomorrow and in the future because I'll never stop learning.
Exactly. We all have these things. We all do. We're all human. And when we don't integrate our shadow and we repress it further and we try to avoid it, it can make us more sick. It can cause us to self-sabotage massively. it can cause us to have this inner turmoil that deteriorates our mental health, definitely prevents us from being able to be authentic, and can even cause self-destructive tendencies. So it's really important to integrate this and not just look at it with disgust and be like, oh, I can't believe that's terrible that I would even think something like that. No, it makes you human. There is not a human on this earth that doesn't have these types of thoughts, feelings, or emotions at some point or another.
Yeah. And the opposite of that there's a term, spiritual bypass. And that's the idea that, oh, everything's fine just because I'm thinking it is, or I'm waving this magic wand so that I'm only goodness and only love and light at all times. And that ignoring the shadow, ignoring the truth, the reality of the fact that we are complex beings, as you said, made up of multiple parts, too many that we can count. And they're constantly new parts probably we're discovering of ourselves if we're really looking all the time. There is no spiritual bypass because that is also a mask. It's just not true. It won't hold true. Then you're going to really feel that, which you brought up before, imposter syndrome can easily creep in if you're saying everything is good, because how is that possible? No.
Yeah, we have to acknowledge and accept. This is the first step. When we are constantly repressing and suppressing our thoughts, parts of ourselves, our traumas, things like imposter syndrome does creep in, and you feel like you are a fake and you are not who you say you are, because you're not being who you say you are, and you are hiding parts of yourself. You are entitled to be authentic, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. There is a place for it. And I encourage you to really explore all of those repressed parts of yourself, the trauma, the emotion. Get support with exploring those things. You can journal and do it on your own too, but if it's difficult and you need help processing, see a therapist, see a coach, see a healer. These are things that we need to integrate and will allow us to feel more whole.
To add something that might sound counterintuitive, but I want to invite everyone to put a mask on purpose. I'll tell you why. When you're fully consciously doing something, it's not hurting you because you're so conscious about it and you're trying it on purpose. And I think you'll realize the difference, and it might even feel funny to you and silly when you literally put on a mask and you say, so what would that look like? It would look like this. Okay, I'm going to have a phone call now. And on this phone call, I'm going to pretend to be a different way and I'll slightly change my voice. That would be putting a mask on, right? Not to protect me, but as a game to play, to show myself what it feels like to have that on. Because when we're doing it consciously, you'll find you don't need it anymore.
Mm.
It can open up the possibility of, wait, what am I doing? That was so silly. And then it lightens the mood too. Of course that's not me. What am I even doing? Just be me.
Yeah. And I think there's also a time and a place for practicing an alter ego, right? When it comes to building safety and taking up space and being more confident.
Yeah. But it really comes down to be around people that make you feel better about who you are and allow you to show up however you are. And those that aren't that way, just without judgment, you just don't have to be as much in communication with them, because it is exhausting and it can end up creating dissonance in your body, which can then turn to inflammation and disease. So, what I noticed too, Kim, is there are two words I use a lot: beauty or beautiful, and literally. Notice the words that you use a lot. Maybe even allow this to be a practice today. Or if you don't notice, listen to something that you recorded and start to listen for those words those will probably be authentic to you. The words that you keep repeating most likely will give you some insight into something about who you are. So for me, literally, beautiful, those two, what does that say? I've never thought about it before, but I'm going to say, so you're getting me right now in real time figuring this out. Beautiful, because I do see beauty in things, and I hold beauty. What I believe beauty are things that affect us in a way that raises our vibration. So that can be a tree, that can be a baby, that can be a sound, that can be a fragrance. Beauty is important to me, and I recognize it and I notice it. Literally, that one's kind of fun for me because it has a connotation to truth, realness. If something is literal, it's real. It's true. It is what it says. It is what it does. So yeah, a little fun exercise. What are yours?
That is interesting. I haven't given that any thought, but it's got some homework for me, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I hear you say safety in your body a lot as a term, and maybe safety. Anyway, it'll be fun to do as homework, and it's fun, and it might be a moving target. It might change and I'm sure it will. I don't think that literally and beauty was always the one that I went to.
Sure.
I just happened to notice. And now that we're doing a podcast, if we listen back, we'll find those words.
Yeah, definitely.
No?
And safety is something that's important to me as somebody that endured a great deal of trauma as a child and throughout my life. So that makes sense. And it is something that I am constantly working on with clients as well. Them building safety in their bodies to take up space and be authentic, release what no longer serves them. So that's very interesting. I will definitely give that some more thought. And I just want to share a couple of resources for anybody that is interested in delving deeper into the shadow self and doing some shadow work, something that we all need to do. And just a couple of books that I have found helpful and I often recommend for clients. So the first is Existential Kink by Carolyn Elliott. And the second is Carl Jung's The Shadow.
Yeah, those are great resources. And I also want to say, anything that works for you, please take it. And anything that doesn't, please let it go. We are not here to tell you how to do it. We're not here to say that we have all the answers, but we love the conversations that get us to at least asking more questions of ourselves that will help our self-awareness and our emotional intelligence and our ability to show up in the world.
It boils down to embracing self-love and loving every single part of ourselves all the time. Just something that we talk about a lot because it is so important. It's such an important piece of the puzzle. Okay, can you give us some examples of how you intentionally love yourself and show yourself love?
I immediately go to when I'm in service to others. The way that I love myself more is when I'm able to be helpful to someone who needs me. That is it for me. That is the bridge to loving myself more. It's not really thinking about myself. It's thinking about how can I serve others. That always does it for me. Another way would be getting enough sleep. I am just a person. We have to know our energy, just on a very physical level. I know that if I don't get 6 hours or more of sleep a night, I don't like myself. So to love myself, I need a certain amount of sleep, and everybody's different with that. So don't take my exact amount here, but I've noticed that about myself. I don't push myself to ever stay up late because what I also noticed, it's not just the amount of sleep. It's when my energy is best in the day, and it helps me love myself more when I'm not pushing myself at times when the day I have an energetic dip. So I'm recognizing that. For me, the morning is my energetic high point. If you need something creative from me and you need my help, please find me in the morning. If it's after 2, 3 in the afternoon, I start to dip in my energy and I'm not as present to be able to help others. So I need to, once I recognize that, I loved myself more because I wasn't trying to be something that I'm not.
I love that. Sleep is a big one for me. I don't like myself if I don't get enough sleep either. And I don't think other people like me either.
So yeah. So tell us about you. How do you do this? How do you love yourself?
I put a lot of energy and effort into self-care and nourishing myself because I know that that's what I need. I have struggled a large portion of my life with mental health, people pleasing, masking, not being true to myself, and depression and anxiety were constant companions of mine for a long time. Self-care is something I take very seriously, exercising, breath work, tapping, being in relationship with good people, surrounding myself with people like you and other dear friends that I can be vulnerable with and share. I go to therapy regularly as well. I always have a coach and mentors. So just really nourishing my mind, body, and soul are massive pieces for me that are non-negotiables, because when I don't do those things, whenever there's a problem in my life, it boils back to those things. If I don't take really good care of myself, and I start to spiral. And there used to be times where I would, spiral into a deep depression. I would stop exercising for months on end. And now, luckily, I'm very good at catching it. If I fall off track for a couple of days. I start to feel anxious and check in with my body. I'm like, okay, I need to get back to my self-care ritual. And as long as I do those things, I tend to be great. And that is ultimately how I love myself.
Beautiful.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of unmasking and self-discovery. Remember that loving yourself is a courageous act, and we are here to cheer you on and support you.
And if you feel so inclined, we would love if you want to review this podcast, because of course it helps us get seen by more people and heard by more people. And we want to share this kind of work with everyone that we can, because you already heard the way that I can love myself is by giving to others. So this is actually a vehicle for that. Exactly. And if you've gotten through this whole episode with us, you are part of a very special circle that we feel connected to. And we want you to know that. And we appreciate you so very much for being here.
Beautiful. I think that's a wrap.
It was a good one. I liked it.
Thanks for joining us on Unapologetic Uplift. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share the love and tell a friend about us, and give us a review.
Please don't miss a thing. Subscribe to this podcast and explore our sponsors, Objects with Purpose, Eco Luxury Candles, and Divine Activation membership.
Objects with Purpose is more than an eco-luxury candle brand. They are time travel devices in the form of a candle. Light the 3 wicks representing past, present, and future with the validation that you are exactly where you need to be. And if you're ready to raise your level of consciousness and step into your unapologetic, unfiltered, and unbothered era, join the Divine Activation membership at cuttingties.coach/queen. With 3 tiers to choose from, you'll find the perfect fit to support your transformation.
Thank you for your listening and love. We'll see you next Wednesday on Unapologetic Uplift.